Welcome to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show. I'm Ted Bonnet.
I'm Phil Proctor, and we're both here.
We're back.
Oh, my goodness. And we have a special guest. Adele Abrams is with us from Washington, ACDC.
Greetings.
Greetings, and she's going to give us some other perspectives on what our guest has to say today.
Yes, our guest will be joining us in a few minutes, Justin Levitt, and he is the go-to guy to ask about constitutional law and democracy and what the hell is going on and what recourse do we have to push back on the illegal rampage going on in Washington.
And he's zooming us from what prison? I forget where. What country is he in?
Loyola Marymount Law School.
Okay.
But he has a lot of experience in Washington, high-level experience in Washington and all of this. So he's
He was with the
some...
Biden administration as
Yep,
well, I think.
yep. So, Phil.
But
how are you?
I'm fine.
Long time no see.
I know. I've been very busy, and Adele and I have been traveling and adventuring. And back here in town, the most interesting thing we saw was Pussy Riot. Yeah, Pussy Riot has been doing like a tour of California. They've done like a dozen shows of a brand new show that they're doing, which is, it's a performance art show delivered in rapid fire Russian with captions at the top of a big screen and coordinated film and...
Pussy Riot is a Russian group of women,
Yes.
performance artists who spoke out against Putin and the
Well, what they
regime.
did was that they did a performance in an Orthodox church, and they got, thrown into the Huskow for that.
Yeah.
They famously are known for speaking out against the Putin regime. And I'm telling you, it was a wonderful experience. It was almost all Americans, kids in the audience at the lodge out there in Highland Park. And everything that they were expressing of their story, Riot Day, their whole story is so terrifyingly pertinent to what is happening to us.
It actually resonated with America.
Yeah. And what was the statement that they led
were
off
going
with?
through everything that we're starting to experience now,
Yeah.
but over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I wanted to note that I've been to Russia once, and that was in 2012, and it was right after these women had been locked up. There were protests in Moscow, and so my memories really of the town is the streets being lined with troops to suppress people, and it taking 3 hours to get from the port into town. But Madonna was also performing when I was there, and she spoke out against it, and they almost arrested her. And I noticed in their narrative, as rapid fire as it was, blah, 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 Madonna. And so what they were talking about, the lead woman of the group, Maria, has just written a book about her experiences, and it's in English. And so she was the primary person who was doing the speaking, the rap.
She did the main delivery.
It wasn't exactly singing. There was a
musicality
to it.
How was their English?
Oh, it hardly mattered. I mean, she didn't speak English, except
But-
to say, "Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here."
But you understood.
No, because they were speaking so quickly.
Wow.
And so, but it was all captioned, and I'd look up and go, "Oh yeah, I heard that. Oh yeah, I heard that."
And it wasn't precisely, but you were able to catch
very poetic.
the meaning of what they were saying. And so before they really got started, they were flashing this repeatedly on the screen. And
This message.
I think it's pretty powerful. We don't choose where we're born. We don't choose the color of our passport, but we do choose how we live our lives, to fight back or not to fight back at the system that makes cogs of humans. So that's a good way to set the tone for today, huh?
It sure does.
Yeah, we're going to ask Professor Levitt, what recourse do we have? The obvious questions that probably people like myself and you are asking, which is what the hell's going on and what can we do? Happy Earth Day, by the way. Would you put that cigarette out, would you please?
Well, no, I'm going to eat it.
Okay.
Don't wake up. Mother Earth. And actually, that was kind of good. You got another one?
Oh, yeah, here. This one's a bubble gum.
Oh, I want the mentholated one.
Oh, the mentholated bubble gum?
Yeah, I'm going to freshen my breath.
Thank God. Thought he'd never get the hint. I wanted to follow up on the show that I did last week.
Oh, would you please?
Yeah, we did a show on guardianship abuse and featuring a dear friend of mine who died in captivity against her will and her lawyer who tried to help her. A really compelling show. In fact, within hours of it launching as a podcast, we got an email from an Allison, also in Texas. And this is what she wrote. Just listened to your podcast with Shelley Thompson and Phil Ross, who is now a personal friend of mine as well. I am 49 and also recently put into guardianship. I was going through a divorce and my youngest child graduated high school days before they put me into a fraudulent guardianship so that they could steal my $3,000 a month disability payments and try to divide our community estate, which includes a $1 million house in San Antonio, Texas, prematurely to my husband and my agreement. I have been a process engineer exposing waste, fraud, and abuse at Fortune 100 companies for 26 years.
Really?
I'm a conservative Christian, outspoken about my whistleblowing and pharma vaccine abuse. That's how I ended up in this mess. Help me! Exclamation point.
Oh, my God.
If you missed the show last week, I can't recommend it enough. It's now on our website, sexyboomershow.com, and wherever you get your podcasts, just search Sexy Boomer Show. If you're over 50 or you love somebody over 50
or you have
of
parents
age,
who are aging.
or parents, it's really something to listen to because what's going on is unbelievable, actually, where people are taken against their will.
Criminal.
Basically stripped of all their assets and locked away in a for-profit facility so the money can be spent. It's basically it's a Medicaid scam.
Has anybody made a movie about this yet?
Well, there was a documentary on Netflix and Dirty Money. They did it, but it's not on because one of the guardians sued and got the show an injunction, so the show is not on. Anyway, we're going to talk about rights in America, not just that,
time we're in,
but democracy as well.
Because hazardous.
You're listening to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show, and joining us now is our guest, Justin Levitt, who is an American constitutional law scholar and professor at Loyola Law School here in Los Angeles. He served as the Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. He focused on voting rights and protecting against employment discrimination. He later served as Senior Policy Advisor for Democracy and Voting Rights under the Biden administration, where he was tasked with ensuring every eligible American has secure, reliable access to a meaningful vote, providing equitable representation in federal, state, and local government. He also is working to restore trust in a democracy deserving of that trust and expanding the avenues by which Americans can engage in robust civic participation, which we all know all of these things are under attack.
That's right.
Professor Levitt's research has been cited extensively in the media and the courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court. He has been invited to testify before committees of the U.S. House and Senate, the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, several state legislative bodies, both federal and state courts. Welcome. May we call you Justin?
Yeah, please.
Hey, thanks
With
so
an
much.
emphasis on the just.
Thank you so much for taking time from your really busy day to help us out here. Well, let me just start. Are we facing a constitutional crisis, in your opinion, right now?
I think, so whatever you want to call this is constitutionally not good. And whether we're in crisis or not, we're in a state of distress.
Yeah.
And desperately need some help from that distress. We've got 1.5 functioning branches of government. We started out with 3. We're used to 3. The system works on 3, for the federal government at least. The judiciary is still largely doing its job. Even when I don't agree with every court decision, the judges are still acting like judges and courts are still acting like courts. They're looking at the law and facts and trying to figure out how the two fit together. The executive branch is off the rails and Congress is absent from the car entirely. And that's not good. That's not how the system was designed. And it's going to be a little bit up to us to put it back on track.
This just didn't happen overnight. This is something that is important to talk about. That I think campaign finance was a big part of it. Citizens United was a big part of it. The lack of taxation of the super rich was a big part of it. And what we've had now is, perhaps you could argue it back to the Reagan administration, where this has been a slow coup of the legislative process, the whole governmental process. Is that an overstatement?
I think it might be an understatement in the following respect. It leaves the voters out of the picture. And I think that we, the people, actually deserve a lot of the blame for this. This isn't just the system happening to us.
Right.
We chose this. Our ability to fly the plane into the ground is both a feature and a bug of the system. We have a real problem with the prosperity gospel in this country, where we tend to give outsized influence to the super wealthy, even when they're not spending on campaigns.
Yeah.
If Warren Buffett, who is not a notorious campaign spender, called up a member of Congress, I guarantee you that he gets his calls returned a whole lot faster than mine, even if I'm a constituent and he's not.
Yeah.
And so there are large parts of the system that are built to reinforce those ties, but ultimately it's on us to decide. And occasionally we do, right? Ask Brad Schimmel in Wisconsin, the candidate for Supreme Court Justice that Elon Musk was donating heavily to and supporting heavily. Ask him whether the voters have control of this process or the super wealthy do. So when we choose, we occasionally can make good choices, but we can also occasionally make really bad ones.
The notable video that was taken in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho recently of the woman being physically ejected for speaking out at a town meeting.
And handcuffed.
Just read today that 6 of those plainclothes, unidentified thugs have been arrested for assault and battery and unlawful imprisonment, I think, is one of the charges. This is an American town hall meeting with an elected representative, and you have jackboots in there who will not identify themselves. It turned out they were from a private security firm that is pretty large and does a lot of this kind of thing. But this seems new, isn't it?
Well, and I'm tremendously heartened, actually, by the fact that, as you know, today there were arrests, which is exactly how it should work. Shouldn't have had to deal with this stuff in the first place.
Right.
But the notion that the justice system is working, even if it's working really slowly and really imperfectly, accountability when people cross the line is really important. And that's accountability in small ways and in very big ones. So we've, unfortunately, always had people willing to cross the line. And I am heartened by the fact that even in today's environment, we still have some accountability for them. You know, some of these trends will feel new to people that haven't experienced them before. In varying parts of the country, some of this feels very, very familiar. And certainly to people overseas, some of this feels even more familiar still.
You know, when you said we're running on 1.5 of the 3 branches, it's kind of a comparison to being on a jetliner. They're built to run on less than 1 engine so they can land safely. But when you get to 1.5 out of 3 engines,
you don't feel good about it.
Yeah, I don't feel good about it. We're pushing the design limits here. The Supreme Court unanimously, very rarely, took the step of jumping over the appellate, not asking for the administration to submit notes, went right ahead at 1 a.m. and said, you do not let those people leave the country. And Trump and his minions are rebelling against that. They're not acknowledging that. So
They're defying the courts.
what is our recourse? I thought I heard that the U.S. Marshals answered to the judicial. It doesn't. There is no enforcement avenue for the judiciary to enforce these contempt charges.
Oh, but there is, though.
The Founding Fathers must have thought this through. So good. Thank you. Please tell us.
Well, the Founding Fathers never thought that we'd put ourselves in the spot that we're in, right? They famously said that the election process takes care of itself because the people that we're entrusting to make this aren't stupid enough to fly the plane into the ground in the first place.
Right.
So we are, yes, the Founding Fathers also didn't foresee political parties. So we're well past the imagination of the Founding Fathers here. And luckily, there is still part of the innovation that they created, the separation of powers, giving each branch a little power of its own, still exists. And you point to, so how are we going to enforce the rule of law? We're getting very close to seeing how much power the judiciary actually has. We very, very, very rarely see all of the powers that the judiciary has because they prefer to tell us and then lecture us and then maybe even sternly lecture us for a while, right? They ramp up the pressure and we never get to seeing what happens when you really get them ticked off. We're getting and we might get there before the month is out with some of the administration calls them deportations. They're not, they're kidnappings.
That's right. Disappearance.
Contrary to court orders. I think you mentioned the marshals, and it is true that when the court wants to put somebody in cuffs, which happens if you defy court orders, they need the U.S. Marshals support. The marshals are supposed to listen to the judiciary, but they ultimately sit in the Department of Justice. And a lot that is supposed to happen isn't happening the way it's supposed to right now. But the judiciary is not powerless, even without the opportunity to put somebody in handcuffs. I think it's really important for people to remember that.
How so?
Two ways. One, the civil contempt power is a way to enforce compliance with court orders that exerts not punishment, not you did this thing 30 days ago, so I'm going to punish you for it, but I'm going to coerce you into compliance. You can do that by throwing somebody into a jail cell, but I think even more powerful, actually, is the notion of exponentially escalating fines. So just take as an example. Okay, you're not going to do what I say. You owe me $1,000 tomorrow. That doubles every day that you don't comply. Mm-hmm. That sort of exponential doubling structure means that you owe me $1 million in 11 days. You owe me $1 billion with a B in 21 days. You owe me $500 billion in 30 days. And nothing says you got to start with $1,000 or that you just got to say it doubles every day. The courts can set those fine structures however they want.
But again, what if they say, well, we're not going to pay?
Have you ever tried getting credit with a $50 debt on your books?
Well, Trump's never had to worry about credit. Trump has all the money. Trump gets all the money he needs from Russia, so his son says.
That might be a party of one agreement. And the most important thing is that when the courts do this, they're not likely to impose these structures on the president. That's actually picking a very big fight very quickly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're likely to impose these fees on the underling at the Department of Insert X that is failing to comply with the order. So right now, the court has been receiving signed declarations from folks in the Department of Homeland Security about what they've been doing to facilitate the return of, for example, Mr. Abrego Garcia, the Maryland father who's stuck in El Salvador for no reason.
Yes.
Right.
The person who's signing those declarations is effectively defying the court's order. And the court knows this, creating a very careful record, being very deliberate, as courts are, because they have this immense power. It shouldn't be used casually. Mm-hmm. But they have the power to make that person poor for life, bankrupt for life. And I think we're going to get to the point very, very quickly where they start using that power in ways that real individual underling officials feel real pain that can't be reimbursed by the government or reimbursed by a rich benefactor. And then the courts can start seizing assets and selling the assets, because once you owe me $50 million, I can take your whatever stuff you've got in the district that used to be yours and is now mine.
You think this might be starting by the end of this month?
I think we'll start seeing the courts. So the courts have been escalating the pressure. They've been getting increasingly annoyed, and they've been noting when administration officials have been listening and not listening. Up until very, very recently, up until, I think, Maryland, effectively. The Trump administration has been doing something that's familiar for criminal defendants and familiar for kids and really unfamiliar for the federal government. They've been misunderstanding or misconstruing or, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I didn't hear you, or did you really mean that, Your Honor? Right? That's a pattern that all of us used to dealing with difficult relatives have experienced in our lives at some point.
Right.
But they haven't been outright defying until now. What they're doing right now is new, and the courts are taking note. And I think the courts are going to, in turn, start ratcheting up the pressure. And that pressure can get pretty significant. I don't think we're going to get to a $500 billion judgment next week, but I'd be very surprised if there weren't real monetary sanctions with teeth coming very shortly from some of the judges who have been seeing the recalcitrance firsthand.
Well, that's
I want to know,
encouraging.
this is not just fiction. This happened to Twitter I think it was 3 years ago, where a court ordered Twitter to hand over some information. Twitter said no. The court said, fine, you owe me $50,000 today, $100,000 tomorrow, $200,000 the day after. And that's all it took. 3 days. And Twitter said, I've had enough.
We found out today in the news that another victim that was deported was a young man who worked in the Detroit area. He was a delivery guy. He made a wrong turn and went on the bridge over to Canada. So he had to turn around and get back into the country, and he was seized. He was taken away, and his name did not show up in El Salvador. He is a missing person. He disappeared, literally. This has got to be pushing the limits to a breaking point here.
Well, and this points to the other means of defense we have is for us to let our representatives know that their complete absence is unwelcome. And we've been starting to do that. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, they've disappeared as well, haven't they? Congress has disappeared.
Congress has
them
totally
away.
disappeared, and they have not been rendered to El Salvador. In town halls across the country, people are ticked off.
They sure are.
And expressing the fact that they're ticked off, and that's right.
Yep.
I think that the framers' real design is that we'd look out for ourselves.
Okay.
And that we choose representatives who looked out for us.
Correct.
And right now, I think an awful lot of members of Congress are starting to push back on the Trump administration in very helpful ways. That's been largely partisan, but not exclusively partisan so far. You saw it with some of the NIH grants. You saw it with some of the tariffs. I think you're going to start seeing it with some of the immigration nonsense, and it's nonsense.
Yeah.
And they're pushing back because constituents are ticked off.
Things are going to splinter if they isolate Trump and decide he's the one. And I don't think Vance has a chance to take the helm. If Trump-
Vance the killer?
The angel of death.
He killed the Pope, and then he's killed some people in India today.
The thing about this administration is that they have very few core beliefs, or at least the leader of it has very few core beliefs. Trump has very few core beliefs. He's also not that strong. What he's doing now is the act of somebody who wants to project strength, but actually reveals a substantial amount of weakness. And when people have pushed back, he's generally backed down.
Right.
So you see that in some of the restrictions on universities. You've seen that with the tariffs. You've seen that with individual senators calling in favors. And he's generally backed down. So I think you're going to start to see some very real pushback to some of the decisions that he will say his subordinates have made.
Yes, right.
That he will deflect blame for, but then undo.
The autocratic playbook is, to attack all institutions, including education. And with the Department of Education now headed by a billionaire professional wrestling mogul who recently praised the future of A1 sauce in schools. To her credit, she built an empire out of nothing, and she has done some public service. It was an unfortunate gaffe, but maybe somebody at her age is a little out of touch. A1, I don't know. You earned your law degree and your master's degree.
She's a saucy little woman.
In public administration from Harvard. So you must be thinking a lot about what Trump has done. He's cut $2.3 billion of funding for Harvard's research, which affects healthcare and all sorts of important things. Yeah. And Harvard has now sued in response and has stood up. I read in the paper today that Harvard Corporation, which runs the university, is getting pressure from some big money donors to settle with the government. I mean, what is that all about?
So I think you've seen this repeatedly in recent past with some of the institutions that Trump has targeted. And you're absolutely right. It's civil society generally, right? There are attacks on lawyers. There are attacks on universities. There will be attacks on, there have already been attacks on religious groups, more liberal Catholic charities that do work overseas. There are going to be attacks on any center of power outside of the government because, as you said, that's exactly how would-be autocrats function. Those that have settled so far have come to the understanding, and this was not hard to come by, that there is no settlement with this administration. There is only more. And so an initial bending of the knee leads only to the next set of unreasonable demands. There's no bottom. And so I think what you're seeing is, fortunately, a number of very big, very powerful civil society institutions and a bunch of very small, less powerful civil society institutions banding together.
Yes.
Where a whole bunch of little fish
very important
bigger fish.
That's right.
Pushing back.
Yeah. You're listening to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show. And our guest today is Justin Levitt, a professor of American constitutional law. Democracy is being tested. And again, another sector being attacked is the media. I think when Reagan deregulated the fairness doctrine,
eliminated.
And with podcasting, the democratization of media, you have somebody like Joe Rogan, who has more audience than all three network news shows combined. And he doesn't really have any leash. It's pretty much whatever he feels like saying, and he is accommodating. And I appreciate his desire to hear all stories. But you can't have people coming and spouting anti-vax lies and not doing your homework to say, that isn't supported by science. You look at the macro of this environment and what's going on, I'm thinking, who gains by this? The only person I can think of is Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, what is the end game here?
For most of the media, I think who gains are the individual enterprises that have turned outrage into profit.
Big time.
You need look no further than the social media, most of the social media institutions. I don't think there's anybody running them. I don't think that's a foreign nation state running them. I think that's profit motive. There are ways to influence the supply, but that's tricky. And I'm a pretty strong First Amendment absolutist. So that's not only practically tricky, it's legally tricky. And in my book, it should be. I think it's far more important to start changing demand. Those things work because we like the candy they supply. And we tune in and we give revenue dollars to advertisers that advertise on a platform.
Yeah.
That's a choice. And your listeners are listening to you guys because you offer reliable information that they like to hear in an entertaining way that they like to tune in for. And that's also a choice. And we need, frankly, more of us to make better choices.
Yeah. Well, that speaks to education and the lack thereof in this country and the lack of critical thinking. And it's going to be piled on by AI. And, you really wonder what's going to happen to free thinking, to critical thought.
As you said, it seems to us that it's been a slow coup, and that basically once the right-wing media took over the airwaves, there have been like 40 years of incessant propaganda, anti-governmental propaganda, anti-liberal propaganda, and it's had a very corrosive effect on the minds of the electorate. And that's part of the reason, as you said, sir, was that we're in the mess that we're in right now, is because the people have been greatly misled and greatly brainwashed.
And diminished.
The power of the people has been diminished.
So the former Surgeon General of the United States said something exceedingly perceptive. I think about this a lot. I don't think we have an information problem. There's been misinformation out there as long as there's been information.
Okay.
The first lie accompanied the first truth pretty closely.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that we have is a loneliness problem.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that when we actually meet up with other real people in the real world, our BS detectors aren't awful. And they're not perfect, but generally common sense actually tends to prevail. And the fact that we don't meet up with real people in the real world anywhere near as much as we used to is actually, I think, a really big impact on how we consume information, how we formulate a worldview. And the pandemic, by the way, dinged us all up in a lot of ways that we have yet to recognize.
Oh, yeah. It's also a question of anonymity, is what you're really saying, right? And you can say anything behind the curtain.
Having the benefit of being older, a boomer, we've seen this happen on our watch.
And I'm a bomber, by the way. I was born in 1940.
But I see it just walking down the street. People are in their own little bubbles. I call it cultural autism. People have their earbuds on and they're walking, and it doesn't matter if you're a foot away or not. I find that there is an awkwardness in organic social contact now, just as it is awkward for us when we text, because you get an entirely different context or meaning from somebody's text because you don't have any of the organic sense attached with it. Mm-hmm. And I suppose that's something that can be really exploited by bad actors.
It can, but it's not inevitable. So there are ways to foster institutions that actually help you. Local journalism, where you read social profiles about the sort of weird person who lives down the street, actually help. They give you a sense. Even the local high school sports scores give you a sense that you live in a community and not just an isolated stream of facts. Mm-hmm. Dog parks and community centers still exist, and a lot of people go to them and actually interact with each other casually.
That's right.
But they get to know each other as people rather than as sort of forced political views.
Or town halls with elected officials. They're interacting there.
Standing in line at the pharmacy for your drugs.
Which brings us to the power of the people. I remember reading that LBJ during the Vietnam War said the only thing he feared were the people in the streets. That was the one thing you couldn't stop. And we're seeing that happen Why did Trump pardon these violent insurrectionists? Why did he say to them, stand back, stand by? Why is Murkowski saying she's afraid to speak out?
Yes.
And why did Hegseth, when he was under oath in the confirmation hearings for Secretary of Defense, when our Senator Adam Schiff asked him pointedly, President Trump in his first term asked Milley, can't you just shoot the protesters in the legs? And Milley fought back and said no. And look what happened to Milley. Schiff said, would you say no? Under oath, he asked Hegseth, and he would not say it.
That's correct.
He would not answer it. So the question is, are we going to see a hot and potentially bloody summer to fight this back? Do you see that in the picture?
So I don't, which doesn't mean we won't get there. But there are a lot of steps that have to come before that. I do see some potential for low-scale violent conflict, and I'm not making lighting, right? That's a serious thing.
Indeed.
Yeah. But even the number of J6 defendants pardoned, if you take as you say, enormous demonstrations all over the country, that's a relatively small population.
Right.
That managed to converge on one place on January 6th. That's why they were able to have the impact they were able to have. You spread that out over the geography of the country, it doesn't amount to much. One of the things that's really important here is to make sure that the people who are upset, and there are a lot of them, continue where they are to express that displeasure across the country in dispersed ways that speak to the representatives in those places and are extremely hard to target. With respect to the military, I think that there's little question that wasn't the only answer that Hegseth gave during his confirmation that was or should have been disturbing. And I think we're seeing increasingly that he's simply unfit.
Totally unfit.
There are a lot of uniformed officers that think very carefully about the responsibilities they're giving to their men and about their responsibilities to the general public. I think as a class, the military officers are exceedingly careful with their use of force.
Good.
And they have not been asked to use that force on American soil, on Americans, thankfully, blessedly. I think there's a long way to go before they willingly deploy to use that force against Americans in a way that makes any of them comfortable. I'm not talking about the political leadership. It is very clear that the president doesn't care.
No, not at all.
But the fact that the people he's ordering to care deeply.
You look at the people that he nominated to run the government, again, another authoritarian playbook, more like a mafia boss playbook, where you pick compromised people, somebody you can leverage, has no hope other than to work for a thug like this, and would break laws in order to maintain their stature. You were in D.C., you worked in the White House, you were in high-level places. Have you ever seen anything like this? What's your take?
Oh, no, this is unrecognizable. In America for the federal government. It's not unrecognizable, as you say. It's not unrecognizable for other countries and how they've done. And it's not particularly surprising. This is exactly what Donald Trump promised.
That's right.
He said he'd rule as a dictator from day one. It's been more than one day, as far as I can tell.
Going up to 100.
But yeah, this is what he promised to do. That said, this is part of why the first part of the conversation is really important. I think accountability comes in many forms. It comes from public protests, but it also comes from the judiciary holding people accountable when they break the laws.
Yeah.
You talked about the charges in Coeur d'Alene. I welcome that. I think that the way the judiciary stands up for itself over the course of the next week or two with respect to kidnappings and foreign renderings and the inability to return, the unwillingness to return people is also going to be extremely important. And I think there are real ways to extract costs for lawbreaking that cause people to question, to doubt, and they certainly know they can't depend on Donald Trump's loyalty to them as support.
Yeah.
It'll be real easy to isolate people and have them think twice and three times and four times about whether they're willing to break the law if there are real consequences. And that's why I think it's important for those consequences to start coming.
Very good point. Isolating the perpetrators.
And on an optimistic note, first time Trump was elected, we've hit bottom. And now here we are, we've really hit bottom. Well, now we're really hitting bottom. So the question is,
we'll get down to hell pretty soon.
Are we going to get the reboot that is so long overdue in this country to get back to our basic democratic principles? How do you see this potentially correcting itself and us seeing some light at the end of this tunnel?
Depends on us. So, and ultimately always has. I think people are increasingly getting ticked off. And what gives me some hope, what warms my heart, is not just that they're getting ticked off about the state of the economy, although there is certainly that. They're getting ticked off about justice. They're getting ticked off about the rule of law. They're getting ticked off about what they see as law-breaking behavior that affects them.
Right.
And things not running right that affect them. And they're starting to make the connection between having a functional government and the sort of services they enjoy.
That's
right.
right.
Understanding how important that is.
Yeah, I see that too.
Taking the food off the plate, that will get them every time.
Yeah.
What does the Supreme Court have to do with what's going on right now?
So that also depends on us. Turns out we elect the people who confirm or don't confirm members of the court, and we elect the people who nominate the members of the court.
Right.
I think you're starting to see even this enormously conservative court, and I don't want to sugarcoat how enormously conservative they are.
Yeah.
I think you're starting to see their red lines too. The fact you led with, the fact that they opened up with a 1 a.m, Friday night to Saturday morning, 1 a.m, they issued an order.
Yep.
7-2, they didn't wait for the two dissenters to say, everybody stop sending people out of the country, pencils down. That's unusual. That's really unusual.
Yes, it is.
And that's a sign that they have seen and don't like what they see where this goes. So I think even a conservative Supreme Court, they're not going to rule every way in a way that I would like, but even they understand the value of the rule of law, at least in part, and understand the very real threat facing. And we, the people, get to decide that longer term too. But it takes us showing up. It takes us caring, and it takes us showing up.
And every election that's going on in the country right now, it's vitally important that people
engage,
stand up and engage themselves.
Hopefully a new generation, it's overdue to come in and objectify a lot of this, and maybe we'll see meaningful campaign finance reform. I know that there's so much to talk to you about. I know you got to go, but the voter fraud non-issue, the gerrymandering, all the corruption, maybe this is hitting bottom, maybe this is a reset. We can always hope for that.
You got to reboot them out of office.
Is exactly right. And there are opportunities for us to show how we care. And frankly, in every election since January 20th, that's happened.
Yes, it has. That's
Yeah.
right.
We'd love to have you back to talk more about what you've really dug into in your career with the voter fraud, redistricting, prison-based gerrymandering. I mean, it's just fascinating what's going on. If you come back sometime and give us a civics lesson, we would really appreciate that.
And I really greatly admire your positive approach and vision as to what is going on. It's very exciting to hear it. It's
We got to
encouraging.
remember we're actually in control here.
Yes.
As much as it seems like other people want to take the reins, we actually are in control here. We just got to we got to decide it. We got to assert it.
Yes, sir.
Good. So maybe we can finally put social media to good use and organize.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope you can come back sometime.
Amen.
Yeah. That was Professor Justin Levitt, an American constitutional law scholar and professor at Loyola Law School here in Los Angeles. He worked in the White House. He was working in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice.
I love engaging with minds like the professors.
How refreshing.
Oh, my
How
God.
refreshing. So keep hope
Because,
alive. That's the deal.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the main feeling I got from this conversation was one of empowerment.
Yeah.
Okay, or at least the right to empowerment and the importance of empowerment.
No, I marched in downtown LA a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
The first march. There were about 10,000 people there. There's something unique to a public gathering, a march. It is the energy force that is unbeatable, that all of these people have to answer to. And he's absolutely right when he says that we are in control and we have to organize that, because all they can do is divide.
Very good point.
You know,
Point well taken. Yes, Adele?
Yeah, well, I wanted to make the note. I marched in Delaware a couple of weeks ago, and
against Delaware? Because I would have. I lived there. I'm
man,
sorry.
I love Delaware.
You lived there.
Joe's my neighbor, man.
I know.
But my point was that what hit me, being a boomer, was that many of the audience and the participants were boomers. There were relatively few people under 50, let's say, and even fewer people in, say, the under 25 group.
I think that's an urban thing, don't you? I mean, because in LA it was I was really happy to see how young the
people.
crowd was. They're all ages.
It may be, and I live at the beach area. There are more retirees, but my point was, if we want to have this change and we want to have the young people really understand what's going on and what's on the line, they need to be brought to these. Grandma, bring your grandkids. Bring your teens, moms. Let them hear it. And people are afraid. I think that is part of it. Is there going to be violence? And I'm not, as sanguine as perhaps our guest was here. I think that there is the potential for violence. I think that the troops, there may be a false flag, there may be military law that's invoked, but it's this whole idea of truly domestic terror, making you afraid to go out in the streets, making you afraid to speak back. I'm getting ready to teach my legal environment, for HR course, and, me being told, how the heck am I going to teach employment law and labor law without mentioning diversity, equity, and inclusion? This is a real challenge, to be able to still teach my students what human rights, civil rights are in the work environment.
But you're not censored in the classroom at this point.
Well, I'm teaching online, but I've already had the email communication about taking a look at my materials.
Oh, you have.
And so.
Big Brother is watching.
Well, we'll be back next week with yet another fabulous Sexy Boomer show. You can hear all of our shows on our website, sexyboomershow.com.
I
am Ted Bonnet.
I'm Phil Proctor, our special guest.
Thank you, Adele.
Adele
Abrams.
And we'll be back next week with yet another show. See you later.